Okay, in our previous examples, we were always solving for a side. So we were looking for the opposite, the adjacent, or the hypotenuse, and we used cosine, sine, or tangent to solve them. Now we're going to look at how to find an angle. So here we don't know what our angle is, but we have two sides. And that really is all we need to find that angle, because we know that the ratio between two sides will be a certain ratio, and we can find the angle from this. So let's look at what we've got here. So here's our right angles. The one across from the right angle, this is the hypotenuse. Here's our angle. So this would be the adjacent. So this is the opposite over here. And we have opposite and hypotenuse. And again, if we look at our SOHCAHTOA, opposite hypotenuse, we're looking at sine. So we know that the sine theta is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. Well, in this case, we've got sine of x is what our angle is called here, and the opposite is 4.3, and the hypotenuse is 7.5. Okay, but how do we find x from that? We know that this is the ratio, but how do we get there? Well, what they're called, we've got functions that'll get us back to x from here, and it's undoing a sine function. It's called a sine inverse, and on your calculator it's probably written as sine to the -1, and that means sine inverse. It's the inverse function. We saw these as exponents. It's not an exponent here. This is saying that it's the inverse function, so it's just using the same notation for something different, so don't get confused by it. Another way you might see it written in some places is called the arc sine. Means the same thing. It's the sine inverse. So what we're going to do, if this is the sine of x is equal to that, then to get x, it's the sine inverse of 4.3 over 7.5. Now, again, if you have a TI, I'll show you how to do that in a minute, or a calculator that if you hit sine inverse will give you an open bracket. Other calculators need the number and then they want to find the sine inverse. So if you're doing it on your TI, okay, you're going to do this. You're going to hit your second function, and you can see right above the sign that says sine inverse, so that'll give me sine inverse. So you see sine inverse open bracket. You're going to say 4.3 divided by 7.5, close bracket, enter, and that's going to give you your answer right there. So it doesn't say, often angles we go just to the degree. If it doesn't tell you what to round to the nearest degree. So here we've got 34.98, etc. That means it's going to be, almost a 35-degree angle, so we're going to call it 35. So x is equal to 35. Make sure you put that degrees in, okay, because it's an angle. It's measured, in our case, in degrees. So that is the answer there. If you have a calculator that doesn't give you that open bracket, you're going to have to say 4.3 divided by 7.5 equals, and then take the sine inverse of that. Make sure you're taking the sine inverse of the answer, because if you just put 4.3 divided by 7.5 sine inverse, it's going to take the sine inverse of 7.5, and it's actually going to freak out a little bit and tell you can't do that. So that's how we do that example 1. Use the same kind of processes and you can do the next 3 questions, and that'll finish off that booklet.